The War Council chamber hummed with tension as Admiral Zextar's crimson eyes swept across the assembled fleet commanders. His scaled hands gripped the edge of the hollow table, where a three-dimensional map of the galaxy rotated slowly, displaying thousands of star systems in brilliant detail. "Gentlemen," his voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder, "today we make history." Commander Velthos, his youngest officer, shifted nervously in his seat. The blue-skinned Altarian had heard the stories. Whispered tales from the Outer Rim territories about a small, blue-green world in an unremarkable spiral arm. A world whose inhabitants had done the impossible. "Admiral," Velthos spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper, "perhaps we should reconsider. The Elder's warning, the Elders are dead." Admiral Zextar's fist slammed onto the table, causing the hologram to flicker. Dead for 3,000 years. Their warnings died with them. But Velthos remembered the ancient inscription carved into the council chamber walls, written in the oldest known language. Of all species in the galaxy, there is one that must never be challenged directly. They call themselves human. They are small, weak, and live brief lives. This makes them the most dangerous beings we have ever encountered. The other commanders nodded eagerly at their admiral's words. The Kethalar Empire had conquered 47 systems in the past decade. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their armies more disciplined than anything the galaxy had seen. What could one primitive world possibly do against them? "Sir," Communications Officer Hexara announced from her station, "long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity in the Sol system. The humans, they're not running." Admiral Zextar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Of course they're not. Primitive species never understand the magnitude of their situation until it's too late." On the main display, Earth appeared, a small blue marble suspended in the cosmic void. Around it, tiny specks of light moved in organized patterns. "Human ships preparing for battle. How many vessels do they have?" Zextar asked. "Approximately 300, sir, against our fleet of 12,000. The bridge erupted in harsh laughter. 300 ships against 12,000? It wasn't a battle. It would be an execution. But in the depths of space, aboard the human flagship UES Defiance, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before her own tactical display. Her dark eyes reflected the cold light of distant stars as she studied the approaching alien armada. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "enemy fleet will reach the outer system in 48 hours. "Good," Chen replied quietly. "That gives us time." Her executive officer, Captain Marcus Webb, frowned. "Time for what, ma'am? We're outnumbered 40-1. Admiral Chen turned to face her bridge crew. Men and women from every corner of Earth. Former enemies who had united in the face of extinction. Their faces showed fear, yes, but something else burned beneath it. Something the Kethalar Empire had never encountered before. "Time to show them why the Elders left that warning," she said. As if on cue, alerts began flashing across every console on the bridge. In the asteroid belt, in the outer planets hidden within the rings of Saturn, human installations were coming online. Installations that shouldn't have been possible for a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. "Ma'am," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving signals from everywhere. Luna Base, Mars Command, the Jupiter mining stations, even the research outpost at Alpha Centauri." Admiral Chen smiled for the first time in days. "Patch me through to all commands." The main screen filled with dozens of faces, admirals, generals, station commanders, and civilian leaders, united not by politics or religion, but by a single burning purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, her voice carrying to every human installation in the solar system and beyond, "they think we're just another species to be conquered. They think our short lives make us weak. They think our small numbers make us irrelevant." She paused, letting her words sink in. "They're about to learn what humanity is really capable of when we have nothing left to lose." In the depths of space, the Kethalar fleet continued its approach, confident in their superiority. Admiral Zextar had conquered worlds populated by trillions. He had faced species with technology that seemed like magic. He had won battles against impossible odds, but he had never faced humans. And somewhere in the cold void between the stars, ancient automated beacons left by the long-dead elders began to transmit their final warning to any who would listen. They do not yield, they do not surrender, they do not break. Challenge them at your peril. The warning went unheard, lost in the vast emptiness of space. The Kethlar fleet pressed on. 47 hours later, the first shots of the war were fired not by the massive Kethlar dreadnoughts but by something far smaller and infinitely more dangerous. Lieutenant Jake Morrison floated in the pilot seat of his modified mining vessel, the Iron Will, somewhere in the darkness between Jupiter and Mars. Around him, 19 other civilian craft drifted silently, their mining lasers retrofitted for a very different purpose. "Remember," Morrison whispered into his comm. "We're just rocks until we're not." The Kethlar advanced scouts swept past them without a second glance. Why would they? The ships registered as nothing more than space debris on their sensors. Old mining vessels, derelict freighters, abandoned research pods. The aliens couldn't know that every piece of debris contained a human crew, waiting. Admiral Zextar stood on his command bridge, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. His advanced scouts had found nothing. No hidden defenses, no massive orbital platforms, just a few primitive space stations and some scattered mining operations. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "Advance fleet is approaching the asteroid belt, no sign of organized resistance." "Excellent. Begin the bombardment of their outer colonies. Let them see what happens to those who—" The first explosion cut him off. On the tactical display, one of his heavy cruisers simply vanished. Not destroyed, vanished, as if it had never existed. "Report!" Zextar roared. "Unknown, sir. The Savage. Talon just disappeared from sensors." Then another ship died, and another. In the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Morrison watched through his scope as his mining laser, supercharged and focused through crystalline lenses that shouldn't have been possible to manufacture, carved through the alien cruiser's shields, like they were tissue paper. Around him, his fellow miners were doing the same. "Laser mining teaches you precision," he muttered, lining up his next shot. "Hit the right spot and the whole asteroid comes apart." He fired again. Another alien ship buckled and died. But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. Back on Earth, in the deep command bunkers beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Patricia Hayes watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The asteroid miners had bought them time, but the main Kethlar fleet was already adapting, spreading out, making themselves harder targets. "Ma'am," her aide reported, "the alien admiral is broadcasting on all frequencies. He's demanding our surrender." General Hayes nodded toward the communication station. "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Zextar in all his reptilian glory. His scaled face twisted in what might have been a smile. "Humans," he hissed, "you have showed more spirit than expected. But this ends now. Surrender, and your deaths will be quick." General Hayes stepped forward, her steel-gray hair catching the light. She had fought in 3 wars before the aliens arrived, had seen humanity at its worst and its best. "Admiral," she replied calmly, "I have a counteroffer." Zextar's eyes narrowed. "You are in no position to negotiate. Leave now," Hayes continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Leave and never come back. This is your only warning." The alien admiral's laughter echoed across the communication channel. "You have 300 ships. We have 12,000. Your world will burn within the day." "Admiral," Hayes said quietly, "you have no idea what you're dealing with." She nodded to her communications officer, who cut the transmission. Around the solar system, humanity's true strength began to reveal itself. Not in massive fleets or planet-killing weapons, but in something far more dangerous: human ingenuity, born from desperation and fueled by an absolute refusal to surrender. On Mars, terraforming equipment designed to move mountains was retooled into kinetic bombardment systems. In the lunar colonies, mass drivers built for shipping cargo were loaded with very different payloads. Even the civilian population had become part of the war machine, Every farmer, every factory worker, every school child contributing to humanity's defense in ways the Kethlar couldn't possibly anticipate. But it was the message that came next that truly showed the aliens what they faced. It wasn't from Earth's government or from the military command. It came from a small research station orbiting Neptune, where Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent the last 10 years studying exotic matter and theoretical physics. Her voice crackled across every communication channel in the solar system. This is Neptune. Station. We're reading massive gravitational distortions throughout the system. Something's happening to space-time itself. Admiral Zextar dismissed the report. Primitive human scientists, probably damaged by their own crude experiments. He was about to learn just how wrong he was, because humanity had indeed been experimenting, not with exotic matter or theoretical physics, but with something far more dangerous. The question of what happens when you corner the most adaptable, most persistent, most stubbornly inventive species the galaxy has ever produced. The answer was about to be written in fire across the stars. The Kethlar main fleet entered Earth's outer system like a steel tsunami, their massive dreadnoughts casting shadows across the orbital platforms of humanity's furthest settlements. Admiral Zextar had regrouped after the asteroid ambush, his forces now moving in tight formation, shields overlapping, sensors sweeping for any sign of human deception. They found none. What they found instead was something that made even veteran warriors pause in confusion. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, his voice uncertain. "The humans, they're broadcasting something." "Another surrender demand?" Zextar sneered. "No, sir. It's music. Across every frequency, from every human installation in the solar system, the same sound echoed through space. A simple melody played on an acoustic guitar, followed by a human voice singing words in a dozen different languages. The song was ancient by human standards, written centuries before they'd ever dreamed of reaching the stars. But the aliens didn't understand what they were hearing. They couldn't know that the song was Amazing Grace, or that it was being sung by every human voice that could draw breath, from the deepest mining colonies to the highest orbital stations. They couldn't know it was humanity's funeral song, not for themselves, but for their enemies. "Cut off their transmissions," Zextar ordered. "Unable to comply, sir. The signals are coming from everywhere. Every ship, every station, even their individual suit comms." As if to punctuate the point, the song swelled, growing louder and more complex as more voices joined the chorus. Children on Earth sang alongside hardened miners on Titan. Corporate executives in their orbital boardrooms harmonized with research scientists in the depths of Europa's ice. And through it all, Admiral Chen's voice cut across the military channels. "All stations, this is command. Begin Operation Torchbearer." The first sign that something was wrong came from the Kethlar fleet's own sensors. "Admiral," the science officer called out, his voice tight with confusion, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. But the sources, they don't match any known weapon signatures." On the tactical display, thousands of energy readings began to appear, not from military installations or warships, but from civilian infrastructure. Power plants, manufacturing, facilities, even agricultural domes were suddenly drawing enormous amounts of energy. "Sir," another officer reported, "long-range sensors are detecting similar buildups in neighboring systems. The Alpha Centauri colony, the Proxima research stations. It's like the humans are powering up everything they've ever built." Admiral Zextar studied the readings with growing unease. In his centuries of conquest, he had learned to recognize the patterns of different species' defensive strategies. The Velkari built massive fortress worlds. The Thulnari relied on cloaking, technology, and hit-and-run tactics. The Morgoth simply threw overwhelming numbers at any threat. But this was something new. "Admiral," came a transmission from one of his scout ships. "You need to see this." The main screen switched to an external view from the scout vessel. In the distance, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the stars. But around it, something impossible was happening. The planet's orbital infrastructure was moving. Space stations that had been in stable orbits for decades were breaking free, their massive bulk accelerating in defiance of physics as humanity understood it. Manufacturing platforms were reconfiguring themselves, their industrial arms reaching out like the limbs of some vast mechanical creature, and between them all, streams of energy flowed like rivers of light. "They're connecting everything," the science officer whispered. "Their entire infrastructure. It's becoming one massive system." But even as the aliens watched in growing alarm, the real revelation was taking place in the depths of human space, where Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically at her console aboard Neptune Station. "This is insane," her colleague, Dr. James Park, muttered as he monitored the energy readings. "The power requirements alone should tear apart half our infrastructure." "Not if we distribute the load correctly," Elena replied, her fingers dancing, "across the quantum field manipulators. We've had 50 years to prepare for this, James. 50 years to turn every single thing we've built into part of something larger. What the Kethlar couldn't understand, what no alien species had ever understood, was that humans didn't just adapt to their environment. They transformed it. Every space station, every mining platform, every research outpost had been built, with hidden capabilities, designed not for conquest but for something far more ambitious. They had turned their entire civilization into a weapon. "Elena," Dr. Park said quietly, "are we sure this will work?" She looked up from her console, her eyes reflecting the streams of energy flowing past the station's viewports. "James, we're about to attempt something that every physicist in the galaxy says is impossible. We're going to use our entire stellar infrastructure to create a localized space-time distortion that will..." She paused, searching for the right words. "We're going to turn our solar system into a trap." Back on the Kethler flagship, alarms began screaming across every console. "Report," Admiral Zextar demanded. "Sir, we're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system. Space-time itself is fluctuating." "That's impossible." "Yes, sir, but it's happening anyway." And then, as if the universe itself had decided to prove the impossibility wrong, the stars began to move. Not the distant stars, those remained, fixed in their courses, but the local stellar bodies, the planets and moons and asteroids of the Sol system, began to shift in their orbits. Slowly at first, then with increasing speed as if guided by some invisible hand. "Admiral," the tactical officer's voice was barely controlled panic. "Long-range navigation is failing. The gravitational fields, they're changing too fast for our computers to compensate." Admiral Zextar stared at the tactical display, watching as the neat formation of his fleet began to waver and spread as individual ships struggled to maintain course in the shifting gravitational currents. And through it all, the human song continued, growing stronger and more complex as more voices joined the impossible harmony. But the true shock was yet to come, because as the aliens watched in growing horror, they began to realize what the humans had actually done. Every space station, every mining platform, every research outpost, every ship and satellite and piece of infrastructure humanity had ever built, all of it was connected now, linked by streams of energy and data into one vast thinking system. They hadn't just built a civilization, they had built a mind, and that mind was now focused entirely on one task: protecting humanity at any cost. The trap was closing, and there was nowhere to run. The Kethler fleet found itself caught in something beyond their comprehension. A maze of twisted space-time where up and down lost meaning, where their most advanced navigation systems failed, and where the very laws of physics seemed to bend to humanity's will. Admiral Zextar gripped his command chair as his massive dreadnought shuddered, its hull groaning under stresses that shouldn't have been possible. Around him, status reports flooded in from across his fleet. Ships trapped in gravitational wells that appeared from nowhere. Vessels finding their weapon systems disabled by energy fields that drained power faster than their reactors could. "Generate it, sir," his communications officer reported, voice tight with fear. "We're receiving a transmission from the human flagship." On screen, Admiral Chen's face appeared on the main display, but she was no longer on her bridge. Instead, she seemed to be standing in a vast chamber filled with streams of light and flowing energy, the heart of humanity's interconnected system. "Admiral Zextar," she said, her voice echoing strangely, "I want to show you something." The display shifted, showing not the battle around Earth but a view from the edge of the galaxy. Stars wheeled in their courses, entire spiral arms rotating in the cosmic dance that had continued for billions of years. "Do you see them?" Chen asked. "The dark spaces between the stars? The empty regions where no light shines?" Zextar said, "Nothing," but his scaled hands tightened on his armrests. "Those aren't empty," Chen continued. "Those are graveyards, the remains of civilizations that made the same mistake you did." The view zoomed in, showing what looked like empty space, but as sensors adjusted, the debris became visible. The twisted remains of ships, the broken hulks of space stations, the scattered remnants of entire fleets. 50,000 years ago, the Velkari Empire controlled a third of the galaxy. They were masters of genetics able to adapt themselves to any environment. They thought they were invincible. The display shifted again, showing different debris fields, different graveyards. 20,000 years ago, the Thulnari Collective achieved technological transcendence. They could bend reality to their will, create matter from thought alone. They believed nothing could stop them. More graveyards, more empty spaces where civilizations had once thrived. The Morgoth swarm, the Zephyri Empire, the crystalline networks, all of them made the same choice you did, Admiral. All of them ignored the one warning that mattered. "Lies," Zextar hissed, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Elders weren't the first species to discover humanity, Admiral. They were the first, to be smart enough to leave us alone." Around the Kethler fleet, the gravitational anomalies were intensifying. Ships that tried to break away found themselves pulled back by forces that seemed to defy every law of physics. Weapons that fired found their energy redirected back at them with compound interest. But it was what happened next that truly broke the alien admiral's understanding of warfare. The human ships began to move, not just the military vessels, every human craft in the system. Cargo haulers, mining barges, research vessels, even the smallest maintenance pods. They moved with perfect coordination, each one taking position in a pattern that seemed random until Admiral Zextar's tactical computer finally recognized what it was looking at. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "they're forming a three-dimensional, mathematical structure. It's a tesseract, a four-dimensional cube projected into three-dimensional space. And at the center of that impossible structure, space itself began to fold." Dr. Elena Vasquez watched from Neptune Station as 50 years of human preparation finally came to fruition. Every space station, every mining platform, every research outpost had been built with this moment in mind, not to conquer or destroy, but to demonstrate something far more terrifying. "The field is stable," she reported to Admiral Chen. "We're successfully manipulating space-time on a solar system scale." "Good," Chen replied from her position at the heart of the human network. "Now show them what we learned from the others." The folded space at the center of the human formation began to glow, and from within it stepped shapes that made the Kethalar crews scream in terror, not because they were horrific, but because they were familiar. Velkari warriors, they're adaptive, genetics allowing them to survive in the vacuum of space. Thulnari reality benders, their crystalline forms pulsing with impossible energies. Morgoth swarm ships, their living hulls rippling with predatory hunger. All the species that had challenged humanity. All of them now serving as humanity's guardians. "You see, Admiral," Chen's voice echoed across all frequencies. "Humans don't just adapt to threats. We learn from them. We integrate their strengths into our own capabilities. Every species that's ever attacked us has become part of us." The truth hit Admiral Zextar like a physical blow. The gravitational manipulations, the energy fields, the reality-bending technology that had trapped his fleet, none of it was originally human. It had been taken from the species that had challenged humanity and lost. "The Elders understood," Chen continued. "They realized that challenging humanity doesn't just risk your own extinction, it guarantees that your species' capabilities will be turned against the next threat. We don't just defeat our enemies, Admiral. We make them part of our family." Around the Kethalar fleet, the absorbed species began to demonstrate their capabilities. Velkari bioships started growing from what had appeared to be empty space. Their adaptive hulls perfectly designed to counter Kethlar weapons. Thulnari energy constructs began phasing through the alien shields as if they didn't exist. But it was the Morgoth swarm forms that truly terrified the invaders, because they began to merge with the Kethlar ships themselves, their living metal, flowing through gaps in the armor, taking control of systems, learning everything there was to know about Kethlar technology. "Stop," Admiral Zextar broadcast across all channels. "We surrender. We'll leave your system." "I know you will," Admiral Chen replied sadly. "But first, we need to make sure you understand what you've just given us." The absorbed Morgoth completed their integration with the Kethlar fleet. In a matter of minutes, humanity now understood everything about Kethlar technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. The invasion fleet had become an unwitting gift, delivering the keys to their own empire's destruction. "Please," Zextar whispered, his proud voice broken. "My people. They didn't know." "They will," Chen replied. "When you return to them, they'll see what you've become. They'll understand what it means to challenge humanity, and they'll make sure no one ever makes your mistake again." The space-time distortions began to fade, the gravitational anomalies subsiding. The Kethlar fleet found itself free to move, but they were no longer the same ships that had entered the system. They were something new now, part Kethlar, part human, part every species that had ever threatened humanity and been absorbed into the collective defense of Earth. As the alien fleet limped away from the solar system, carrying with them the seeds of their own transformation, Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of sadness. Another species had learned the hard way what the elders had tried to warn them about. But perhaps, she thought, their sacrifice would save others from making the same mistake. Behind her, the vast network of human civilization continued its work, growing stronger with each passing day, preparing for the next threat that would inevitably come. Because there was always another threat, and humanity would be ready. Epilogue. The new warning. 5 years after the Kethlar invasion, the galaxy had become a very different place. Captain Velthos, formerly Commander Velthos of the Kethlar Empire, stood on the bridge of his transformed vessel, watching as construction proceeded on humanity's first interstellar research station. The ship that had once been a Kethlar destroyer was now something entirely new. Its bioadaptive hull courtesy of Velkari technology, its reality-shaping capabilities inherited from the Thulnari, its living computational systems evolved from Morgoth wetware. It was, in essence, a perfect fusion of every species that had ever challenged humanity. "Captain," his communications officer reported, a human named Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the exchange officers who now served on every transformed vessel, were receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the assembled representatives of the galaxy's remaining free civilizations. Velthos could see fear in their eyes, the same fear that had gripped him when Admiral Zextar announced the invasion of Earth. "Captain Velthos," the council speaker began, her crystalline voice carrying across the void, "the council has reached a decision regarding humanity's expansion." Velthos nodded calmly. In the years since his transformation, he had gained something he'd never possessed as a Kethlar perspective. He could see the galaxy's situation from multiple viewpoints simultaneously, understanding not just his own species' concerns, but those of humanity and every absorbed civilization. "We're listening," he replied. "Humanity's integration of conquered species has been noted. While we understand that these integrations were defensive in nature, the Council is concerned about the implications of such rapid technological advancement." Behind the speaker, Velthos could see representatives from dozens of species, all of them trying to hide the same expression. They weren't just afraid of humanity's growing power, they were afraid of what would happen if they challenged it. "The Tier Council proposes a formal treaty," the speaker continued. "Humanity will limit its expansion to systems within a 50-light-year radius of Sul, and in exchange the galactic community will formally recognize human sovereignty over those territories." Lieutenant Kim leaned over and whispered, "Sir, that's less than 1% of our current exploration range." Velthos smiled, an expression that his transformed physiology now made possible despite his reptilian heritage. Speaker, I appreciate the Council's offer, but I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation. How so? Humanity isn't expanding. They're evolving. Every species they've integrated hasn't been conquered, they've been saved. The confusion on the speaker's face was evident. Saved from what? Velthos gestured to his bridge crew, beings, from a dozen different species, all working together with a harmony that would have been impossible under any other circumstance. Former enemies had become family, their diverse capabilities combining to create something greater than the sum of its parts. From extinction, he said simply. Do you know what happens to species that attack humanity and lose? They don't just survive, they thrive. The Velkari were dying out before they challenged Earth. Their genetic adaptability was becoming a weakness, making them susceptible to viral plagues. Now they're stronger than ever. He paused, looking directly into the camera. The Thulnari had transcended physical existence but lost their connection to the material universe. They were fading away, becoming pure thought, with no anchor to reality. Now they have purpose again. The Morgoth had achieved perfect biological efficiency but lost their individuality in the process. Now they retain their collective capabilities while developing personal identities. The speaker's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. And the Kethler? We were conquerors, Velthos said quietly. We defined ourselves by what we could take from others. Now we define ourselves by what we can give. On Earth, Admiral Chen stood in the transformed command center that had once been NORAD, watching the conversation unfold. Around her, representatives of every absorbed species worked alongside humans, their combined knowledge pushing the boundaries of science and philosophy in ways none of them could have achieved alone. Ma'am, Dr. Vasquez reported from her new position as Director of Integrated Sciences. The Council's biosignatures indicate elevated stress responses across all species. They're not just afraid, they're terrified. Chen nodded sadly. She had hoped that word of humanity's true nature would spread peacefully, that other species would understand what the elders had tried to tell them. But fear had a way of overriding wisdom. Elena, she said quietly, how many species in the Council have been showing signs of military buildup? 17, ma'am. And 3 more have gone completely dark. No communications, no trade, no diplomatic contact. Chen closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what was coming. The galaxy was heading toward another crisis, one that would make the Kethlar invasion look like a minor skirmish. But humanity would be ready. They always were. Captain Velthos, she said, opening a direct channel to the transformed Kethlar. Officer, please extend an invitation to the Galactic Council. Tell them they're welcome to visit our integrated civilizations to see for themselves what we've built together. On his bridge, Velthos received the message and nodded to the Council speaker. Admiral Chen extends an invitation for Council representatives to tour our joint research facilities. You can see firsthand what integration means. The speaker's response was immediate and predictable. The Council respectfully declines. We prefer to maintain appropriate diplomatic distance. Velthos sighed, a sound that carried the sadness of someone who had learned the hard way what such thinking led to. Speaker, I want you to understand something. Humanity doesn't want to conquer the galaxy. They don't even want to rule it. They just want to be left alone to grow and learn and become something greater than they were yesterday. He paused, letting his words sink in. But if you force them to defend themselves, if you make the same mistake my people made, you won't be fighting humanity. You'll be fighting everyone who's ever learned to call them family. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Back on Earth, in the deep archives beneath Geneva, the ancient warning left by the elders had been updated. New text appeared alongside the original inscription, written in dozens of languages from across the galaxy. We tried to warn you. We carved our message in stone and metal, broadcast it across the cosmos, embedded it in the very quantum structure of space-time itself. But still they come, these young species drunk on their own power, convinced that their strength makes them invincible. They never listen. They never learn. Not until it's too late. So we leave this final record, not as a warning. Warnings are ignored, but as an explanation for those who come after. When you find the empty systems, the dark spaces where civilizations once thrived, know that they were not destroyed. They were transformed. They became something better than they ever could have been. Alone, they became human. This is not conquest. This is evolution. This is what happens when you challenge a species that turns every defeat into victory, every enemy into family, every ending into a new beginning. The humans call it integration. We call it inevitable. They are no longer just human. They are everyone they have ever saved from their own worst impulses, and still they grow. As the message was completed, automated systems throughout the galaxy began broadcasting it on every frequency, in every language, to every world that possessed the technology to receive it. Some species listened, some learned. But somewhere in the depths of space, other civilizations were already making the same fateful decision that had doomed the Kethlar. They were planning to challenge humanity, and humanity, surrounded by their ever-growing family of integrated species, continued their work, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as gardeners of consciousness, nurturing the galaxy towards something it had never been before, something greater, something unified, something that the elders had dreamed of but never achieved. The transformation of the galaxy had begun not with conquest, but with the simple human refusal to surrender in the face of extinction, and it would continue until every species in the cosmos had learned what it truly meant to be human, not by birth, but by choice, not by force, but by love, not through domination, but through integration. The elders had been wrong about only one thing. Humanity wasn't dangerous because they were small and weak and lived brief lives. They were dangerous because they made everyone they touched stronger, and there was no force in the universe more powerful than a species that had learned to see former enemies as family. The galaxy was about to discover what it meant to be truly united, whether it wanted to or not.